Connie was just 15 years old, but she already had a maturity about her that made her stand out among her peers. She was bright, driven, and determined to build a future on her own terms. The scholarship she had won to attend a prestigious summer program in tech was her ticket out, a chance to prove that hard work and ambition could shape her destiny. The $15,000 scholarship wasn't just money, it was her dream, and she was determined to manage it responsibly. Connie had heard a lot about her mother's bank Turner Company over the years. Her mom, Carla Turner, was the CEO of the bank, a woman who had transformed it into one of the largest and most respected financial institutions in the country. Carla had built Turner Company from the ground up, starting with a single office and a vision to challenge the status quo. Now at 46, she was known for being a powerhouse in the finance world, a tough, no-nonsense leader who had earned her place in a field traditionally dominated by men. Despite all of her mother's success, Connie didn't want to be associated with the bank. She loved her mother, but she didn't want her success to define her. She wanted to make her own way, to prove that she could stand on her own 2 feet. So when she received her scholarship, she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She would deposit the money into her own bank account, her own name on the statement, no strings attached. Connie walked into Turner Company that morning, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It was her first time at the bank without her mother by her side. She had opened the account a few months earlier, under her own name, and had made a few small deposits. Today was different, though. Today was about something bigger. Today was about showing that she could handle things on her own. She approached the counter, where a young teller, Rachel, greeted her with a professional smile, though there was something about the way she looked at Connie that made her feel uneasy. Maybe it was the way Rachel's eyes lingered a little too long, or how she seemed to size Connie up as though she didn't quite belong. "I'd like to deposit this scholarship check into my account," Connie said, placing the check on the counter. Rachel glanced at the check, then at Connie. Her smile faltered for a moment before she quickly hid it behind a professional mask. "Can I have your ID, please?" she asked, her tone clipped. Connie handed over her identification card, watching as Rachel typed something into her computer. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. Connie felt a growing sense of unease as Rachel's fingers paused, and then the teller's eyes widened slightly. "Sorry, but there seems to be an issue with your account," Rachel said, her voice colder now. "It's flagged. You'll need to speak to a manager." Connie blinked, confused. "There's no issue with my account. I've deposited money before." Rachel didn't let her finish. "I'm afraid I can't process this deposit," she cut in, her tone turning dismissive. Connie felt her chest tighten. This wasn't normal. She had always been polite and followed the rules. She had even made sure to double-check the details of her account before coming here today. Why was she being treated like this? "Is there a problem with my account?" Connie asked again, her voice steady, but starting to tremble with frustration. Rachel didn't respond immediately. She just handed the ID back, her eyes avoiding Connie's. "Please, wait here," she said, motioning for a manager. Moments later, a middle-aged man with a neatly combed head of gray hair appeared. His name was Mr. Andrews, the branch manager. He looked down at Connie with a mix of indifference and barely concealed impatience. "What's going on?" he asked. Connie repeated her request. "I'd like to deposit my scholarship money, but Rachel says my account is flagged." Mr. Andrews glanced at the computer screen, then back at Connie, his expression hardening. "Your account's flagged for a security review," he said without much concern. "You'll need to come back another time. We're not able to process it today." Connie's stomach sank. "But it's my money. I've won a scholarship, and I need to deposit it now." Mr. Andrews shook his head, clearly uninterested. "You'll have to wait. We'll call you when everything is sorted." Connie felt a surge of anger. She was 15, and the way she was being treated, it felt personal. She had no idea why they were making things so difficult, but it felt like they were assuming she wasn't capable of handling her own business. The more she tried to explain herself, the more she was brushed off, as if she wasn't even there. As she stood there, trying to keep calm, she noticed someone walking into the bank, a woman whose presence immediately commanded attention. It was Carla Turner, her mother. Dressed in a tailored black suit with a serious expression on her face, she walked into the lobby, her heels clicking against the marble floor. It was the same woman Connie had seen in board meetings, heard about in the news, the woman who had built an empire. But today, Carla wasn't just the CEO of Turner Company, she was Connie's mother, and Connie wasn't about to let her be dismissed like this. "Mom," Connie called out, her voice breaking through the tension. Carla's eyes scanned the room, quickly landing on her daughter. She moved toward Connie with purpose, her gaze narrowing as she took in the situation. "Rachel, Mr. Andrews," Carla said, her voice cool but firm. "What's going on here? Why is my daughter being treated like this?" Rachel opened her mouth to speak but fell silent when Carla's sharp gaze fixed on her. "We had an issue with her account, Mom," Rachel stammered, looking anywhere but at Carla. Carla's jaw tightened. "My daughter's account is in perfect standing. I think the issue is not with her account but with how you're treating her." She turned to Connie, her expression softening. "Connie, come with me. I'll handle this." As they moved toward Carla's office, the manager and teller exchanged nervous glances. Connie couldn't help but wonder, did they even know who her mother was? Did they realize that the woman they had just dismissed so easily was the very CEO of the bank they worked for? Or had they just assumed that because she was a young black girl, she didn't belong in the same space? Once in Carla's office, Carla turned to Connie, her face soft but serious. "You don't have to apologize for wanting to handle your business, sweetheart. But this is a perfect example of how some people judge based on assumptions, not facts." Connie nodded, her eyes brimming with both frustration and gratitude. "It just doesn't make sense. Why would they do this? Why would they treat me like that?" Carla's expression hardened again, a sharpness to her voice. "Because sometimes people can't see past the surface. They judge you based on how you look, where you come from, and who they think you should be. But you'll prove them wrong like I did," she smiled softly. "Just remember, you're capable. You don't need anyone's permission to take control of your life." Carla then turned to the phone on her desk, dialing a number. "I'll make sure this issue is taken care of. And I'll make sure the staff here understands that every customer, every single person deserves respect, regardless of who they are, where they come from." As Connie left the bank with her mother, she felt a surge of both pride and anger. Her mother's power was undeniable. But this wasn't just about her mother. It was about how many other young people like her were being dismissed because of assumptions, because of the color of their skin or their age. How many were being shut down before they even had the chance to prove themselves? The air outside the bank was thick with the heavy weight of the moment, and for the first time that day, Connie felt a strange mix of emotions: relief and disbelief, pride and frustration. She had just witnessed her mother flex her power, her unshakable presence demanding respect from a staff that hadn't even recognized who they were dealing with. But at the same time, the thought that this was all because of her appearance, the way she looked, her age, and even the assumptions about her left a bitter taste in her mouth. As they walked to the car, Carla glanced over at Connie, her expression softening. "I'm proud of you for standing your ground in there, but you shouldn't have had to." Connie didn't look at her mother. "It's not fair, Mom. They never even asked me what was going on. They just decided that I didn't belong there. If you hadn't walked in, they would have just sent me away without even letting me explain." Carla's eyes narrowed, but her voice was calm. "That's what happens sometimes. People see a young black girl, and they assume she doesn't have the knowledge, the power, or the resources to be there. But you proved them wrong today, and I'm proud of you for that." Connie didn't say anything for a moment. Her mother's words, though encouraging, didn't quite settle the storm of emotions inside her. "It just feels like I'm invisible to them, like they don't even see me, only what they think I am." Carla pulled the car into the parking lot, the engine humming quietly. "That's because often People don't see us for who we truly are. They see what's easy to assume, what's on the surface. But that's not your problem, Connie. It's theirs. Connie sighed deeply. She knew her mother was right, but it didn't make the experience any easier. The feeling of being dismissed, of being judged based on assumptions, was something that many Black people knew all too well. But to have it happen in a place where her mother had worked so hard to build, where people were supposed to be treated with dignity, was harder to stomach than she had anticipated. As they sat in the car for a moment, the tension between them slowly began to melt away. Carla broke the silence. "You know, I don't think the staff at Turner Company knew who you were," Carla said thoughtfully. "The thing about being in my position is that everyone assumes you're untouchable, that you don't have to deal with what others do. But it's important to remember, Connie, no matter how powerful you become, you'll always have to fight for your space in this world." Connie frowned. But isn't the whole point of building something, of having power, to not have to fight for respect anymore? Carla smiled, though it was a knowing, almost sad smile. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But the truth is, even the most powerful people face these moments. It's how you deal with them that matters. You can let it break you, or you can use it to fuel your drive. Connie thought about this for a moment. "So you think I should use this experience to prove something?" Carla's eyes softened, a maternal tenderness shining through. "No, not to anyone else. You don't need to prove anything to people who can't see your worth. This is about proving something to yourself, that you don't need to wait for permission to be who you are." The words settled in Connie's heart like a quiet truth, but she still wasn't sure how to carry them. It wasn't just about the money or the scholarship, it was about her identity, her value, and the fight to be seen as more than just a young girl in a world that had yet to learn how to respect her. "Mom," Connie said quietly, her voice breaking the calm in the car, "I don't know if I can keep doing this, feeling like I'm never enough." Carla turned to face her, her hand still gripping the steering wheel, her face softening as she looked at her daughter. "I know it feels hard now, Connie, but remember, those moments will come. Every time someone looks at you like they don't think that you belong, every time you feel that sting, you have the power to turn it into something stronger. You're not alone in this fight. You've got me, and you've got your own strength." Connie looked out the window, the weight of her mother's words hanging in the air. Maybe it wasn't about the scholarship money after all. Maybe it was about learning how to walk in a world that wasn't ready for her to take up space. "Thanks, Mom," Connie whispered, her voice barely audible. "I guess I still have a lot to learn." Carla smiled, starting the car and pulling out of the parking lot. "We all do. But you'll learn it in your time, and you'll do it your way." A few days later, Connie was back at the bank. This time it was different. She wasn't walking in with her mother by her side, but she wasn't going in as the same young girl who had been brushed off and dismissed. She was walking in with her head held high, carrying the same determination she had before, but now with the knowledge that she had a voice, a presence, and a future to fight for. As she approached the counter, Rachel, the teller, glanced up at her with a mixture of surprise and awkwardness. Connie could feel the tension in the air, the guilt radiating off the woman who had wronged her. "Is everything all right today?" Rachel asked, her voice faltering as she scanned Connie's face. Connie smiled, her expression calm and collected. "Yes, I'm here to deposit the scholarship check today," she said confidently, "and I'll need to speak with the manager again." Rachel hesitated but then nodded. As she went to call the manager, Connie stood tall, her heart steady, knowing that this time nothing could hold her back. When Mr. Andrews came over, he greeted her with a nervous politeness. "Miss Turner, we've sorted out the issue with your account." Connie nodded. "I'm glad to hear that." Before he could say anything else, she spoke again, her voice firm. "I just want to make sure that in the future, no one else gets treated like I was treated the other day. This bank is about respect, and I expect that to be true for everyone, no matter their age, skin color, or background." Mr. Andrews nodded quickly, but his eyes didn't meet hers. "Of course, Miss Turner. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again." Connie smiled softly. I hope you will. As she completed her deposit and left the bank, the air felt different. She had walked into Turner Company as a young girl who had been overlooked and dismissed, but she was leaving as a young woman who knew her worth and who was ready to demand the respect she deserved. She wasn't just Connie anymore. She was someone who would make the world see her, whether they liked it or not. The days that followed were a mix of reflection and quiet determination for Connie. What had happened at Turner Company had shaken her, but it had also ignited something inside her. She had always known that the world could be an unfair place, but experiencing it firsthand had been an eye-opening lesson in resilience. The sting of being dismissed, of having her intelligence and worth questioned just because of her age and appearance, would stay with her for a long time. But it had also fueled a fire within her, a desire to prove not just to others, but to herself, that she was capable of more than anyone could imagine. She had walked into the bank that day as a young girl who had been dismissed, and she had left with the confidence of someone who had earned her place. But it wasn't over. This battle, like so many others, wasn't one she could win in a day. It was something that would take time, patience, and effort, and she was willing to fight for it. The following week, as Connie sat at her desk, working on the tech program she had been accepted to, she couldn't help but think about the incident at the bank. She knew her mother, Carla, had done what any mother would do in that situation. She had used her influence to make things right. But that didn't change the fact that Connie had been judged unfairly by people who had no idea who she was or what she was capable of. She had received a message from her mother later that evening after the incident. I've made sure that the bank staff understands the importance of diversity and inclusion, Connie. No one should ever be treated the way you were. While she appreciated her mother's efforts, Connie couldn't help but feel like it was a moment she had to own herself. She had always been told that she would have to work twice as hard to prove herself. But she also knew that sometimes just showing up wasn't enough. She had to make her presence felt in ways that couldn't be ignored. As days turned into weeks, Connie noticed small but significant changes in the way people interacted with her. It was as if she had grown into herself, as if the confidence she carried in the wake of her experience had changed how others saw her. Teachers at school began to ask her for her opinion more often. Her classmates, once dismissive or indifferent, started to take her seriously. But it wasn't just the outside world that was changing. It was Connie herself. Her scholarship program, a summer tech boot camp, was going incredibly well. The program was designed to challenge students to build real-world applications using cutting-edge technology, and Connie had been immersed in it for weeks. She was learning to code, to solve problems, and to create things that could potentially change lives. The feeling of accomplishment was nothing short of exhilarating, and it was the first time she truly felt in control of her future. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging coding session, Connie received an unexpected call. It was from Turner Company, and the voice on the other end was the last person she expected to hear from: Rachel, the teller who had initially dismissed her. "Hi, Miss Turner," Rachel began hesitantly, her voice shaky. "I just wanted to personally apologize for what happened at the bank a few weeks ago. I realize I made a huge mistake, and I wanted to take responsibility for it. I've learned a lot from that experience, and I want to make sure I do better in the future." Connie was quiet for a moment, surprised by the call. It wasn't often that someone who had wronged her reached out for an apology. But something in Rachel's voice made Connie pause. There was sincerity there. "I appreciate you calling, Rachel," Connie said, her voice calm but firm. "But it's not just about the apology. It's about making sure no one else is treated like I was. I don't think you really understood what you did at the time. It wasn't just about the money, it was about assuming that I didn't belong there." Rachel sighed on the other end of the line. "I know. I was wrong. I didn't see you for who you were. And I'm sorry. I've been working with the training department at the bank to better understand diversity and inclusion, and I'm making sure that I don't make that mistake again." Connie felt a sense of closure in hearing those words. It wasn't perfect, it didn't erase the feeling of being dismissed in the first place, but it was a step in the right direction. "I'm glad you're doing that," Connie replied. but I also think it's important that we all hold ourselves accountable. It's not just about the apology, it's about changing how we think, how we see each other. There was a long pause on the other end. I agree, Rachel finally said, and I want to make sure I'm part of that change. Thank you for helping me understand that. The call ended, and Connie sat back in her chair, taking a deep breath. It wasn't every day that someone took accountability for their actions, and it certainly wasn't easy to forgive. But in that moment, Connie realized something powerful. She didn't need to hold on to anger or resentment to prove her strength. Sometimes the most powerful thing she could do was to allow growth both for herself and others. As she sat at her desk, Connie reflected on how far she had come. She had walked into Turner Company as a teenager who had been underestimated and treated unfairly. But she had left with her head held high, with the confidence that no matter what the world threw at her, she had the power to overcome it. She had learned that her mother's legacy wasn't just about the power she had built, but about the way she carried herself through adversity. And now Connie was starting to carve out her own path, a path that was uniquely hers. But there was still a lingering question that gnawed at her. How many others had faced the same kind of treatment? How many had been judged and dismissed before they even had a chance to speak for themselves? And what could she do to help make sure that the world saw people for who they truly were, rather than who they assumed they were? As Connie walked home that evening, she knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But she was ready for them. She had learned one important thing from her mother's example and her own experience. Power didn't come from wealth or status, it came from knowing who you were, standing in your truth, and using your voice to make a difference. Connie wasn't done yet. She was just getting started. The following months were filled with growth and unexpected challenges for Connie. What had started as a simple incident at Turner Company had sparked something deeper inside her, something that wouldn't be silenced. Every step she took, every achievement she reached, felt like part of a larger journey. She had overcome the sting of being dismissed at the bank, but the question that lingered in her mind remained: how many others were being treated the same way? It wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't about proving herself or gaining respect. It was about ensuring that no one else would be subjected to the kind of unfair treatment she had faced. The injustice had awakened a fire within her to make a real difference, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been overlooked, marginalized, or treated unfairly because of assumptions, biases, or prejudices. Connie's determination only grew stronger after receiving an unexpected invitation to speak at a youth conference on racial equity and inclusion. The conference, which would take place in the city, was being organized by a group of local activists, business leaders, and educators who were determined to spark change in their communities. The conference was aimed at empowering young people to stand up for justice, challenge biases, and fight for a world that saw people for who they truly were. Connie had hesitated at first. At 15, she was still figuring out who she was, and public speaking in front of a crowd of influential people felt like a lot of pressure. But something deep inside her told her that this was her moment. She couldn't let the opportunity slip by. She had a story to tell, and it was a story that needed to be heard. She stood before the crowd that day, a little nervous but also determined. Her mother, Carla, had always told her that the most important part of speaking was staying true to who you were. And so that's exactly what she did. She spoke about her experience at Turner Company, about the way she had been dismissed, ignored, and treated as if she didn't belong. But she also spoke about how, in the end, she had turned that experience into something positive, how it had given her the strength to fight for herself and for others who had faced similar injustices. I was just a 15-year-old girl trying to deposit scholarship money, Connie began, her voice steady and clear. But when I walked into Turner Company, I wasn't seen for who I was. I was judged by how I looked, by my age, and by assumptions that had nothing to do with me. I was told I couldn't deposit my money, and I was dismissed without even being asked for my side of the story. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. I was lucky enough that my mother is the CEO of the bank, and when she found out, she made sure that the issue was handled. But what about the other young people, or the people who don't have the privilege of being able to speak up or have their story heard? What happens to them? Connie's voice shook slightly as she continued. The truth is, this happens more than we know. We all face prejudice and discrimination in different ways, and we can't just sit back and let it happen. We have to stand up. We have to make sure that we see each other for who we really are, not just the surface, not the assumptions, but the real person. The room was silent as Connie finished her speech, and for a moment she wasn't sure if anyone was even listening. But then, slowly, people began to clap. It started softly, but quickly built into a standing ovation. Connie's heart swelled. She had spoken her truth, and she had been heard. That day marked a turning point for Connie. She didn't just leave the conference feeling like she had shared her story. She left with a new sense of purpose. She realized that her journey wasn't over. The fight for justice, for equality, was just beginning. She had the power to help shape the narrative, to challenge the assumptions that people had about others, and to demand change. In the weeks that followed, Connie's story began to spread. It resonated with so many people who had experienced similar discrimination or been underestimated by society. She was contacted by local activists, media outlets, and even the CEO of a nonprofit dedicated to youth empowerment. She became a voice for those who felt invisible, and her words began to carry weight. But Connie knew that this was only the beginning. She wasn't just going to let this injustice slide, not without fighting for something more substantial. She had the resources, the connections, and the platform to push for real change. Her mother, Carla, had been supportive, but she had also been cautious. She knew how hard it could be to challenge the system, even from the inside. But she had always told Connie that power wasn't just about influence or status, it was about using your voice to make a difference. And that's exactly what Connie planned to do. Months later, Connie's persistence led to a groundbreaking decision at Turner Company, the bank. Under the guidance of Carla Turner, announced a new initiative aimed at combating systemic bias and promoting inclusivity across the company's operations. They would be rolling out a comprehensive training program for all employees, starting with an intensive anti-discrimination and bias training that would be mandatory for everyone, from the tellers to the managers to the executives. But it didn't stop there. The bank also announced a new fund dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth who had faced barriers to education and career opportunities, helping them access scholarships, internships, and mentorship programs. For Connie, the decision felt like a personal victory. This wasn't just about fixing one isolated incident, it was about making lasting change, about creating a culture that valued every individual, regardless of their background or appearance. But the fight for justice didn't end there. Carla Turner, empowered by her daughter's strength and vision, went even further. She spearheaded a national campaign for financial institutions to adopt similar measures, training programs, outreach efforts, and policies aimed at creating a more inclusive environment. She made it clear to her colleagues in the industry that change wasn't just a buzzword, it was a necessity. And as more banks began to take notice and follow suit, Carla used her position to hold them accountable, making sure that her bank's initiatives weren't just a one-off but a part of a much larger movement toward change. As for Connie, she knew that this was just the start of her journey. The world had seen her strength, her ability to stand up for what was right, and to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She wasn't just the daughter of a CEO. She was a force in her own right, a young woman whose voice could echo through the halls of institutions, demanding that they do better, be better. One day, as Connie walked past the Turner Company building, now with its new training program and social justice initiatives, she smiled. She had come full circle from being dismissed as a young girl to being the one who had helped change the very institution that had underestimated her. And as she looked toward the future, she knew this wasn't the end. The fight for justice wasn't over, and she would be there every step of the way, leading the charge for those who couldn't yet speak for themselves. Justice had been served, but the journey for equality and respect was far from complete. Connie wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. and she was ready for whatever came next. What's your take on this powerful story of Connie standing up against discrimination? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to fight for what's right? Drop your thoughts below, and let's start a conversation. If this story moved you, like and hit that subscribe button right now and share with others so they can learn too.